Kalau tak ada three certainties rule tu, tidak kalau sesuatu amanah yang seorang settler nak buat tetapi tak boleh prove one of the certainties, then amanah itu tidak sah atau the trust will not be valid as a trust. So, but once a trust is valid, kita juga kena lihat whether it can be enforced. So, how is that so? Is by looking at whether or not the trust is completely constituted. Okay. Jadi ini tak topik untuk hari ini lah ya. Okay. Okay, jadi basically creation of trust ni yang saya cakap tadi lah. Okay, so when you create a trust, bila you nak buat satu amanah, ada beberapa formality dan beberapa peraturan atau rules that you need to follow. Okay, once you have fulfilled the formalities, then rules, namely three certainties rule tu, formalities and three certainties rule tu, kita juga kena lihat whether amanah itu lengkap, whether the trust is completely constituted. Okay. So apakah yang dimaksudkan dengan a completely constituted trust? Apa yang dimaksudkan dengan amanah itu lengkap? Bila kita bila kita pergi balik kepada proses amanah. Jadi dalam proses amanah, seorang settler nanti akan proses dia akan pindah milik, dia akan transfer harta amanah tersebut kepada pemegang amanah, dan pemegang amanah kemudian akan memegang harta amanah tersebut bagi pihak beneficiary. Okay, beneficiary adalah orang yang akan dapat faedah daripada amanah tersebut. Jadi itu proses amanah. Jadi dalam completely constituted trust ataupun apabila kita nak lihat satu amanah itu lengkap atau tidak, proses yang relevan di sini is the vesting of property to the trustee. Iaitu adakah kita nak tengok adakah settler tersebut telah pindah milik amanah tersebut kepada pemegang amanah. Did the settler transfer or vest the property to the trustee? If there is an effective transfer of the trust property to the trustee, then the trust is considered as completely constituted. Okay, apabila kita sebut vesting of property or effective transfer of trust property, of course yang kita perlu tengok ialah ataupun question persoalan yang timbul ialah adakah ini bermaksud actual transfer? Maknanya katalah macam satu harta kan, let's say tanah tu transfer, you ada belajar tanah, tanah tu transfer maknanya you sign 14A and then there's an effective transfer, kan? Ataupun kalau kereta you tukar hak milik, contohnya lah. Kalau barang-barang lain you serahkan. So adakah perlu selesai semua proses baru amanah itu completely constituted? Itu yang kita nak tengok hari ni. Okay, general rule is you have to transfer, but it does not mean that proses itu kena lengkap. Harta itu perlu berada di atas atas nama pemegang amanah. That is the general rule. So the meaning of vesting on effective transfer tu sebenarnya bukan bermaksud proses itu lengkap dan selesai. Nanti kita akan tengok apa mahkamah terangkan berkenaan perkara ini. Okey. Jadi ini yang tadi effective transfer of property to the trustee. Ada dua situasi. Satu adalah bila kita nak transfer, so you imagine seorang settler, seorang yang membuat amanah itu, bila dia nak transfer property, of course the normal situation ialah settler itu, harta itu adalah milik dia. Kan? Settler is the owner of the property both at law and equity. So then dia buat that effective transfer ataupun vesting of property tersebut. Satu lagi situasi adalah apabila settler itu dia bukan owner of the property both at law and equity. Dia possess an equitable interest in the property. Apakah maksud equitable interest in the property? Contohnya beneficiary. Dia ada equitable in the property, boleh tak dia buat satu amanah? Itu maksud situasi yang kedua tersebut. So effective transfer of property arises in two situations where the settler is the owner of the property both at law and equity, and where the settler possess an equitable interest in the property. Okay, kita rujuk kepada situasi pertama where the settler is the owner of the property both at law and equity. In this situation, tak ada masalah sebab dia memang the owner of the property. Whether you look at it from the legal perspective or from the equitable perspective, dia memang owner of the property. So the property vests legal interest in the property, the settler has legal interest in the property, then he will vest legal interest in the trust property in the trustee. Okay. So apa maksud dia? Dia akan buat macam biasalah situasi yang biasa, dia kena vest ataupun transfer harta amanah tersebut kepada pemegang amanah. Or dia perlu buat everything in his power to do so. Maknanya dia kena transfer, number one, ataupun sekiranya dia tidak melakukan transfer itu tersebut ataupun transfer did not happen but he has done everything in his power. Dia dah buat semua keupayaan dia dalam keupayaan dia untuk membuat pindah milik tersebut. Okay. Okay, contohnya kalau dalam in the case of a movable property, contohnya movable property, contohnya buku ataupun painting, dia dah serahlah benda tu kepada trustee. So that means dia dah vest the trust property onto the trustee. So itu adalah situasi pertama. Situasi kedua ialah, okay, sebelum kita pergi situasi kedua, kita lihat kes ini. In Jaffa and Taylor, okay, in this case, physical possession of the trust property to the trustee was held not to be required. Okay. The trust property, a painting, was in the hands of a third party as agent of the settler. By a document, the settler purported to give the painting to his 3 children. And as 2 of the children were minors, the settler placed their interest in the hands of trustee as stated in the document that was given to the trustees. Each trustee agreed to act and was given a copy of the document. The court held that even though the painting is in the hands of a third party, the declaration in the document constituted a transfer of the trust property. Therefore, there is vesting of trust property. So you tengok yang tadi kan kita katakan settler dalam kes macam kita compare kes ni dengan ni settler in that case is the owner of the property both at law and equity. So he needs to vest the legal interest of the property into the trustee. So adakah dia dah, kalau dia tak vest, adakah dia lakukan everything in his power to this effect? Of course, dalam contoh kalau immovable property, macam tadi painting, dia perlu serahkan painting tersebut kepada trustee. Tapi dalam kes Jaffa ni kata, walaupun you tak serahkan, tetapi you have done everything in your power to do so. And dalam kes Jaffa ni, kalau kita lihat, by doing, kat sini dia dah, he placed their interest in the hands of the trustee as stated in the document that was given to the trustee, and the trustee has accepted it. So that in itself constituted vesting of trustee, vesting of property into the trustee. Sebab settler tersebut dah lakukan everything in his power to effect the transfer or to vest the property into the trust property into the trustee. Okay? Yes. Ya ke? Daripada starting tak keluar? Lah, kenapa tak cakap daripada awal? Saya dah share lah. Sekejap. Sekejap. Ada tak? Okay. Sekejap. Do I need to repeat? Okay, ini yang tadi. Creation of trust. Nampak kan? Nampak tak?
Nampak.
Okay, so ni yang tadi. Saya nak repeat ke? Nak repeat ke tak nak?
Maybe briefly, Doctor. Briefly. Briefly repeat it, Doctor. Don't need to be extensive.
Okay. Okay, so like I said earlier, when you want to create a trust, kita ada ada beberapa benda yang kita kena pastikan lah. This in terms of to ensure that amanah itu sah dan boleh dikuatkuasakan. So kita dah tengok formalities the first lecture hari tu, lepas tu kita tengok three certainties rule, and then today kita kena pastikan yang apabila dah dua tu dah kita pastikan wujud, kita kena pastikan amanah itu lengkap ataupun completely constituted. How? By vesting of trust property to the trustee. Okay, what does vesting of property to the trustee mean? It means effective transfer of trust property to the trustee. Sebab bila kita tengok balik proses amanah tu kan, amanah tu what is amanah is a process, right? So settler transfer trust property to the trustee, trustee will hold for the benefit of the beneficiary. So that is once the vesting of property is done and there is an effective transfer of trust property, that means the trust is completely constituted. Okay. Okay, so ada dua situasi macam mana you nak buat effective transfer of trust property. Dua situasi is satu, apabila settler itu is the owner of the property both at law and equity. The second one is apabila settler itu is not the owner in law yet, but he is an owner in equity or he possesses an equitable interest in the property. So kita akan tengok situasi pertama dahulu, which is where the settler is the owner of the property both at law and equity. How do you how do you ensure that amanah itu completely constituted? Macam mana kita nak pastikan amanah itu lengkap? Kita kena vest legal interest of the property, of the trust property onto the trustee, ataupun kalau you tak buat macam tu, you have done everything in your power to make sure that you have done everything in your power to vest your legal interest in the property onto the trustee. So kalau dalam contohnya, kalau dalam movable property, you delivery lah. Macam saya kata, kalau painting, you bagi painting tu. Tapi kalau you lihat case Jafar ni, kau kata, kalau you tak bagi pun painting tu kepada trustee, but you have done everything in your power to do so, and in this case, dia dah buat dokumen, the painting is in the hands of a third party. Tetapi he has stated in a document that he placed his interest in the painting in the hands of the trustee. So that declaration is enough. And that falls under the second situation tadi, whereby he has done everything in his power to effect the transfer. Okay, so that is the case of what Jafar is trying to say lah. Okay, maknanya sekarang vesting of property to the trustee tak semestinya transfer itu complete. Okay, kalau you dah lakukan everything in your power untuk effect the transfer, then that is enough. That can constitute a completely constituted trust. Okay. Okay, nampak kan slide?
Nampak,
slide ada
Doktor.
kan? Okay, sekarang slide ada tak?
Ada, Doktor.
Okay. Okay, so sekarang kita lihat kepada situasi yang kedua. So tadi situasi yang pertama where settler tu ialah owner both in law and in equity. So dalam situasi yang kedua ialah apabila settler tu ada equitable interest in the property. Contohnya dia adalah beneficiary. So tapi dia tahu dia beneficiary of a trust. So he is going to get the trust property kan. Tapi maknanya if that is the case, dia belum ada legal title to the property. He only has an equitable ownership on the property. So adakah dia boleh buat amanah? So the answer is yes. So how do you make sure that the trust is completely constituted? Is you vest the property, the trust property, by way of an assignment of your interest. Okay, last semester you ada belajar assignment kan? Equitable assignment, legal perbezaan, equitable assignment, and legal assignment semua tu kan? Okay, so you in the case whereby the settler has no legal title but has equitable interest in the property, so you how do you ensure that the trust made by an equitable owner is completely constituted? Is by way of vesting of trust property by way of an assignment of interest. Maknanya macam mana? For example, dalam ni you nampak settler kan, trustee, beneficiary. Settler 1, trustee 1, beneficiary 1. So this is trust number 1. Contohnya saya bagi nama lah trust number 1. So bila kita lihat trust number 1 tu, okay, settler number 1 transfer trust property kepada trustee number 1 dan beneficiary number 1 akan dapat hak dia. So at this point of time, beneficiary itu belum ada legal title. So but he has an equitable ownership on the property, on the trust property. So beneficiary number 1 nak create a trust in favor of another beneficiary. So second situation kat bawah tu, dia akan jadi settler number 2. Okay, settler number 2 ataupun second trust lah. So dia akan settle number 2, then dia akan lantik another trustee. It can be the same trustee, it can be a different trustee, but this is trustee for the second trust. Okay, so kita bagi nama dia trustee number 2. Then dia akan ada beneficiary, so beneficiary number 2. So in this situation, bagaimana dia nak pastikan the trust is completely constituted and therefore ada that vesting of property onto the trustee tu, dia sebab dia tak boleh effect transfer sebab dia belum ada legal ownership kan. So dia nak buat macam mana? Dia akan assign interest dia, kepentingan dia dalam harta amanah tu yang dibuat oleh settler number 1 tu. Harta tu sekarang dengan trustee number 1 kan. So dia akan buat satu assignment of his interest, kepentingan dia dalam harta amanah tersebut kepada trustee number 2 untuk benefit faedah beneficiary number 2. So kalau you have an equitable interest in the property, you can still create a trust by way of an assignment of your interest in the trust property. Okay? Okay, trust may be constituted where the property is vested in the trustees even though it reached them in a capacity different from their office as trustees of the trust in question. Okay, apa maksud dia ni? Sebab kadang-kadang macam contohnya dalam situasi yang kita lihat ni kan, trustee number 1 adalah first trust yang dibuat oleh settler. Trustee number 2 adalah second trust yang dibuat oleh settler number 2. Tetapi trustee number 1 dengan number 2 tu could be the same people. Ataupun trustee number 1 and 2 ni could be the same people. Ataupun it can also be trustee number 2 ni could also be beneficiary ni, which is the settler. Kalau settler dia buat declaration lah. Okay, that is not complicated. Tapi usually-nya in situation yang saya cakap tadi tu, mungkin trustee number 1 and number 2 adalah orang yang sama. Okay, jadi dia dah dapat property itu from the first trust. Okay, so persoalannya, adakah dia perlu a separate declaration to constitute vesting of property of the second trust ataupun tidak. Okay, so ini yang dimaksudkan the property is vested in the trustee even though it reached them in a capacity different from the office. Maknanya mungkin trustee number 2 ni cakap, oh saya dah memang trust property tu dah memang ada kat saya, tapi saya dapat trust property tu in my capacity as trustee for the first trust, not as trustee for the second trust. So what will happen then? Okay. Okay, kita tengok dua case ni kita kena compare. Rallies will trust. Okay. Dalam kes ni, a testator left his residuary estate on trust for his widow for life. Okay. And then for his two daughters, Irene and Helen. Helen's marriage settlement included a covenant to settle existing and after acquired property in favor of certain volunteers. Helen predeceased dia mother, maknanya dia mati dulu daripada mak dia. So never transferred her remainder interest pursuant to her covenant. The claimant was the trustee, both of the testator's will and also of Helen's marriage settlement. So kat dalam kes ni, the trustee of the two is the same people. Trustee number 1 and number 2 is the same. Okay. The court had to decide on what trust the residue was held. The court held that the vesting of property in the trustee was sufficient to constitute the trust of the remainder interest even though the property came to him in his other capacity as trustee of the will. The circumstance that the claimant hold the fund because he was appointed a trustee of the will is irrelevant. He is at law the owner of the fund and the means by which he became so have no effect upon the quality of his legal ownership. Okay, so dalam kes ni, mahkamah kata walaupun dia dapat harta itu sampai kat dia, dalam kapasiti dia sebagai, kita rujuk balik tadi punya situasi, trustee number 1, trustee number 2. Sebab dalam kes ni ada dua. The first one is the first yang testator left residual estate on trust for his widow and life and then anak dia. So the beneficiary of the first trust is the mother and the two daughters. Okay, so sepatutnya selepas mak dia, sebab widow for life, so the mother akan dapat benefit from the trust property sampai dia hidup, apabila dia mati pergi kepada kedua anak dia. Okay, and then anak dia yang Helen tu pun ada another one. Okay, so yang the second trust yang anak dia punya trust tu ialah hak dia daripada trust pertama tu dia bagi kepada beneficiary dia. Alright, so tetapi trustee dalam kes ni adalah orang yang sama. So, trustee tu contend that, okay, for the second trust, dia tak pernah dapat the property. Because Helen tu mati dulu daripada mak dia. So, the benefit from the first trust never reach Helen. So, Helen tak. Maknanya there's no vesting of property lah. Okay. Tapi mahkamah kat sini kata that is irrelevant because dia sebab the trustee kat sini nak kata the vesting of property onto him tu came from the first trust. Okay, mahkamah kat sini kata tu yang dekat mahkamah kat sini kata it is irrelevant in which circumstances that you dapat harta tersebut. Okay, he is at law the owner of the fund and by means of which he became so have no effect upon the quality of his legal ownership. So maknanya walaupun you dapat from tu tapi there is already vesting of property because you even though you dapat from the first manah kat situ. Okay, so mahkamah kat sini kata tak kisah. Okay, because as long as the property has vested in you, you dapat dari from which trust is not relevant. Okay. Okay. However, kalau you compare case ini dengan satu lagi case, Brooks settlement, a settler made a voluntary settlement which he purported to assign after acquired property to the trustee Lloyds Bank. Okay, trustee dia kat sini Lloyds Bank. Lepas tu, after that, a power of appointment under another settlement of which Lloyd was also a trustee was exercised in the settler's favour. It was held that the settler was entitled to be paid the appointed sum by the bank because the assignment of a mere expectancy was effective. Thus, the beneficiaries had no claim. So dalam kes ni pula dia berbeza sebab dalam kes ni walaupun trustee tu orang yang sama, tetapi settler itu buat amanah itu based on a mere expectancy. Sebab dia kata kat sini in which he purported to assign after acquired property. Maknanya apa-apa property yang dia akan dapat later. Okay, so dia appoint trustee bank. Contohnya duit lah sebab ni bank kan. So duit akan masuk later. So dalam kes ni mahkamah kata tak ada amanah. There's no, the trust was not completely constituted, therefore it cannot be enforced because property itu adalah mere expectancy. It's not, dia berbeza dengan yang tadi tu residuary estate, maknanya residuary estate maknanya bila you dah you buat will, you dah bagi kat orang, yang property yang you selepas you dah bagi tu goes to a certain person. Okay, tapi ini dia bukan residuary, dia adalah expectancy, maknanya apa-apa yang dia mungkin akan dapat. So based on that, mahkamah kata the trust is the trust is not valid and there is no completely constituted trust. Okay, so the assignment of mere expectancy was ineffective. So beneficiary ni tak boleh enforce lah. Okay. Okay. Sekarang kita nak tengok actually tadi saya dah explain proses, situasi semua. Sebenarnya sekarang ni kita akan tengok apa dia sebenarnya a completely constituted trust. Okay. A completely constituted trust is sekejap. A completely constituted trust is wait. Okay, a completely constituted trust. Nampak slide kan? A completely constituted trust is one which has been perfectly created. What do you mean by perfectly created? The settler has done everything in his power necessary to transfer his interest in the trust property to a trustee for the benefit of the beneficiary or has declared himself a trustee of that property. Okay, so itu maksud dia a trust that is perfectly created. Maknanya settler tu dia dah buat everything in his power macam saya cakap tadi untuk pindah milik kepentingan dia dalam harta amanah itu kepada pemegang amanah untuk benefit, untuk faedah beneficiary. Ataupun kalau dia tak buat macam tu, dia declare diri dia sendiri sebagai pemegang amanah. Maknanya dalam second situation ni settler tu juga adalah seorang pemegang amanah. So that is a completely constituted trust. Okay, bila kita sebut pasal completely constituted trust, kes yang you all mesti tahu dan ingat dan faham adalah dua kes. Satu adalah kes ini, Milroy and Lott, and the other case is Pirose. Okay, dalam Milroy and Lott ni, the hakim dalam kes tersebut cakap, in order to render a voluntary settlement valid and effectual, the settler must have done everything which was necessary to be done in order to transfer the property and render the settlement binding upon him. He may do this by actually transferring the trust property to the beneficiary or to the trustee or declare himself as the trustee for the settlement to be binding, for there is no equity in this court to perfect an imperfect gift. Okay, so in other words, apa yang mahkamah cakap kat sini, to make sure that there is a valid and effectual trust, settler must do everything untuk transfer trust property tersebut kepada trustee. Okay, bagaimana dia buat? By actually transferring Okay, ataupun declare himself a trustee of that trust. Okay, dan kat sini mahkamah guna ada juga maxim no equity in discord to perfect and imperfect gift. Maksud dia kat sini sekiranya you tak lakukan that vesting of property, that means the gift is not perfect. Okay, it's not perfect and therefore the maxim equity, there is no equity in discord to perfect and imperfect gift will apply. Okay, itu case Milroy and Lott. Okay. For example, T bequeath 50,000 to A and B on trust for the purpose of property to be settled on C and the children of C. The trust property has been vested in the trustee on trust for the beneficiary for the beneficiaries. The trust is therefore completely constituted. What is a completely constituted trust? What is an incompletely constituted trust? An incompletely constituted trust is one which requires some further action by the settler before it can be said to be perfectly created. So, tadi kita dah lihat apa dia amanah yang lengkap, completely constituted trust. Jadi, apakah pula amanah tidak lengkap? Amanah tidak lengkap ialah apabila you require a certain action lah on the part of the settler before the transfer could be made. Okay, ataupun there is another step ataupun certain action that the settler needs to do before it can be said to be perfectly created. Maknanya contohnya kalau dia proper vesting tu kan, dia mesti dah sign, dia mesti dah buat whatever procedure that he needs to do to effect the transfer. The transfer need not actually happen or need not actually materialize, tetapi on the part of the settler dia dah lakukan semua perkara untuk proses pindah milik tersebut. Therefore, the amanah is completely constituted. Kalau dia masih ada beberapa langkah yang dia perlu buat untuk pindah milik, that means, and dia tak buat langkah-langkah tersebut, that means amanah itu belum lengkap. Okay, then that is an incompletely constituted trust. Contoh, A wanted to create a trust for the sum of 50,000 for the benefit of B and C as a trustee but never got to give the money to C to hold for B. The trust was not completely constituted. Okay, kalau macam duit kan, kalau let's say saya nak buat amanah 100,000 nak bagi kepada B adalah pemegang amanah, duit tu saya serah pada B. And then B pegang sebagai pemegang amanah untuk C. Jadi kalau sekiranya saya nak buat amanah, benda yang sama tetap duit, tapi saya cakap pada B, okay, you hold this money, saya nak bagi 100,000 untuk saya nanti sebagai pemegang amanah untuk C. Harta amanah adalah 100,000, tetapi saya tak serahkan duit tu kepada B. Then the trust is not completely constituted. Amanah itu tidak lengkap. Jadi beneficiary tersebut tak boleh kuatkuasakan amanah. Beneficiary tersebut tak boleh insist on the trustee to enforce the trust. Okay, so itu kesan dia kalau amanah itu tidak lengkap. Okay, tadi saya kata dua kes. So dalam untuk kita faham dan lihat completely and incompletely constituted trust, dua kes ni mesti tahu dan mesti faham. Dan mesti faham perbezaan antara dua kes ini. Milroy and Lott and Rose. Dalam semua kes-kes local case pun semua akan rujuk these two cases. Okay, dalam Milroy and Lott, settler tu X, dia nak transfer harta amanah tu adalah share. Jadi dia nak transfer share itu to Y to be held in trust for Z. So Z adalah beneficiary, Y adalah trustee. X later handed the share certificate to Y. Okay, sebab Y adalah pemegang amanah kan. Jadi dia serahkan certificate tu kepada Y. Y mempunyai a general power of attorney to transfer share tersebut ke atas nama dia. Tetapi proses itu hanya boleh dilakukan by registering the transferee in the bank's book. And this was not done by X. Okay, maknanya X patutnya dia memang dah buat, dia dah bagi share certificate, dia dah sign power of attorney, tetapi there is another step that he needs to do whereby dia kena register nama transferee tersebut kepada dalam bank's book, and he did not do this. So dalam kes ini mahkamah kata the trust is incompletely constituted. It's not completely constituted. Therefore, beneficiary of the trust tidak ada hak untuk tuntut daripada pemegang amanah. Okay. Compare kes ini dengan REROS. Dalam REROS sama juga share. So the donor executed 2 valid transfer of shares in a company and handed them to the donee together with the certificate. And it was then up to the company's directors to act upon the transfer. Dalam kes ni, court said that the Milroy Doctrine, referring to the Milroy case, had no application. Therefore, in REROS, the trust is completely constituted. So, apa perbezaan antara Milroy and Lord and REROS? Dalam REROS tu, kita lihat settler tersebut, dia dah lakukan everything in his power to transfer the share. Dalam REROS, dia dah serahkan, dia dah execute transfer of share, cuma the shares has not been transferred to the trustee sebab dalam REROS it depended on the action of the company's director, not the action of the settler. Tapi dalam Milroy and Lord, the shares was not transferred lagi, tetapi the step that needed to be done was supposed to be done by the settler, bukan by some other people. So dalam Milroy and Lord, the settler here has not done everything in his power to effect the transfer. Okay, as opposed to in REROS, dalam REROS he has done everything in his power, cuma the transfer has not been, the last step has not been done because it depended on a third party's action. So dalam dua kes ini kita lihat apakah yang dimaksudkan dengan settler has done everything in his power to effect the transfer. So if the settler has done everything in his power to effect the transfer to the trustee, then the trust is completely constituted. Okay, trust itu akan menjadi amanah yang lengkap. Dan okay. So kita dah nampak what is incompletely constituted trust, apa yang perlu dilakukan oleh settler. Kita dah tengok dua situasi berbeza apabila settler owner dan apabila settler owner at law and equity, dan apabila settler owner only in equity. So kenapa pentingnya amanah itu lengkap? Okay. So whether or not the beneficiaries may be able to enforce a trust will often depend on whether the trust has or has not been completely constituted. Sebab tu tadi saya sebut dalam kes-kes kan, beneficiary tak ada hak kan. So if the trust has been completely constituted, apabila amanah itu lengkap, beneficiary boleh kuatkuasakan amanah itu against the trustee. Kalau amanah itu tidak lengkap, beneficiary tidak ada hak untuk kuatkuasakan amanah kerana because it will not operate as a trust unless the beneficiaries has given valuable consideration. Itu yang tadi maxim equity will not assist a volunteer. So kalau kita lihat kat sini, kalau sekiranya amanah itu adalah amanah yang tidak lengkap, beneficiary tak boleh enforce kuatkuasakan amanah. Dia tak boleh, kalau trustee tak transfer, tak bagi harta amanah tu pada dia, dia tak boleh kuatkuasa lah. Dia tak boleh minta daripada trustee. Dia tak boleh kuatkuasakan amanah tersebut. Tetapi kalau amanah itu lengkap tak ada masalah lah kan. Tapi sekiranya amanah itu tidak lengkap tetapi beneficiary itu telah memberikan sedikit balasan. Okay, if the beneficiary has given consideration, value ataupun consideration, then beneficiary itu tidak dikategoriskan as a volunteer. Itu yang Maxim equity will not assist a volunteer. Okay, kalau beneficiary itu telah bagi consideration, or if the beneficiary has given consideration on the property, or maknanya beneficiary itu is not a volunteer. Okay, so beneficiary has given consideration, then the beneficiary can enforce an incompletely constituted trust. So itu beza dia. If a beneficiary is not a volunteer is a person who has not given consideration. Maknanya kalau you dapat sesuatu, you tak ada bagi balasan, tak bagi duit ke, or any kind of consideration, then you are considered as a volunteer. If you have given some kind of consideration is not just money. If you have given some kind of consideration, then you are no longer a volunteer. If you are no longer a volunteer, the Maxim equity will not assist a volunteer, will not be applicable, and therefore beneficiary boleh kuatkuasakan amanah yang tidak lengkap. Okay, I repeat, if the trust is not completely constituted, the beneficiary cannot enforce the trust against the trustees. Therefore, in other words, he cannot ask the trustee to enforce the trust. He cannot claim the trust property against the trustee. But if the beneficiary has given consideration, the beneficiary is no longer a volunteer, therefore he can enforce an incompletely constituted trust. Right? So itu beza dia. Okay, dalam completely constituted trust and incompletely constituted trust. Right? So sekarang kita tengok. Okay. A trust is only enforceable if it is completely constituted. An incompletely constituted trust cannot be enforced by beneficiaries unless the beneficiaries has given consideration. In Milroy and Lott, there is no equity in discord to perfect an imperfect gift, and the maxim of equity will not assist a volunteer will apply. Okay, so sekarang kita tengok who is a volunteer. A volunteer refers to a person who has not given any consideration. In trust, a volunteer refers to the beneficiary. Sebab beneficiary terima faedah daripada harta amanah tanpa memberi apa-apa balasan. A beneficiary in a completely constituted trust is a volunteer who can enforce a trust. But a beneficiary in an incompletely constituted trust is a volunteer who cannot enforce the trust. Ni macam saya explain tadi lah. Dalam Yong Ah Chee, case Yong Ah Chee, a volunteer is a beneficiary who has not given any valuable consideration for the creation of a settlement or trust. It is a settled rule of equity that a court of equity would not render assistance to a volunteer in the case of an incompletely constituted trust. An incompletely constituted trust is one in which the trust property has not been finally and completely vested in the trustee. An example of such an incompletely constituted trust is in Milroy and Lott. Okay, this is what is stated in Yong Ah Chee. Okay, so what do you mean by consideration? Saya rasa dalam kontrak you ada belajarkan consideration, balasan atau consideration. So dalam kontrak usually it's probably money lah. Most of the time generally is money. Tapi dalam of course consideration is money or money's worth. Okay, so where a donor intend to make a gift but does not hand over the property to the donee, there is no legal principle to compel the donor to make that gift unless the donee has given consideration. So what is consideration? So consideration, of course, normally consideration refers to money, okay, but it also refers to money's worth. And it also refers to natural love and affection. and it also refers to marriage. So in a marriage settlement, kan, marriage too is already a consideration. So beneficiary of a marriage settlement is not considered as a volunteer sebab mereka telah memberikan balasan. Sebab balasan marriage is considered as a consideration lah. National love and affection also considered as consideration. Therefore, that's why in a marriage settlement usually there is no issue as the beneficiary of a marriage settlement who is not considered as a volunteer because they have given consideration. In trust, an incompletely constituted trust can be enforced on the strength of the consideration offered. For example, tadi saya cakap, marriage consideration. Beneficiaries of a marriage settlement is not a volunteer. So who are beneficiaries of a marriage settlement? Husband, wife, issue. Issue adalah anak-anak. Next of kin is not considered, does not fall within the ambit of beneficiaries of marriage settlement. Therefore, they are considered as volunteer. So kalau they are volunteer, the trust must be completely constituted. Okay, boleh rujuk kes ini dua, nanti boleh baca dalam most textbooks ada kes ni, Pullen and Co, Plumtree. Okay, so tadi kita dah lihat completely constituted trust, kita dah lihat who are volunteers. So, dan kita juga tengok maxim equity will not assist a volunteer. Okay, bila kita lihat maxim equity will not assist a volunteer ini, when we refer to this maxim, there are exceptions to this maxim. Namely, 3 exceptions. Rule in Strong and Bird, Donatio Mortis Causa ataupun DMC, and proprietary estoppel. Proprietary estoppel you dah belajar last semester kan, estoppel, proprietary estoppel, promissory estoppel and proprietary estoppel kan. So kita akan tengok what are these 3 exceptions. So what is first exception to the maxim equity will not assist a volunteer? Debt is released at law if the debtor becomes the executor of the creditor's estate. So it is a rule where an incomplete gift is made during the donor's lifetime and the donor appointed the donee as the executor, or in the case of an intestacy, the donee is appointed as the administrator. The vesting of the property in the donee in his capacity as executor or administrator may be treated as the completion of the gift, overriding the claims of the beneficiaries under the will or intestacy. Maksud dia kat sini, kan tadi kita kata kena ada vesting of property baru dia complete kan. Tapi kalau tidak ada isu yang beneficiary tu volunteer and all that kan. So tapi kalau let's say the macam dalam kes ni, right, the donor tu appoint the donee as executor or administrator, then that fact, that appointment in itself makes the trust complete. Okay, the vesting of the property in the donee in his capacity as executor and administrator may be treated as the completion of the gift. Maknanya that it becomes the vesting of the property. Okay, kita tengok apa kes ni sebenarnya. Okay, B kat sini borrow money, sum of money £1,100 from A, his stepmother who live in his house. Okay, paying the rent of £212 and 10 shillings a quarter for board. Okay, every 4 months. And it was agreed that the debt should be paid off by the deduction of 1,000 from each quarter's payment. Maknanya tolak daripada jumlah yang duit yang dipinjam tadi. Deduction of this amount were made for 2 quarters, but on the third quarter day thereafter, A paid the full amount. A tu stepmother dia. Dia tak potong dah. Okay, dia pay the full amount. Thus, on her death, some 4 years later, £900 remain owing. B was appointed her sole executor and proved the will. Later, A's next of kin claimed the balance of the debt, and it was held that the appointment of B as executor released the debt. So dalam kes ni, beneficiary of the will, maknanya dia punya waris-waris nak claim 900 tu daripada B. Tetapi dalam kes ni, B is the beneficiary of the trust. Okay, so dalam kes ni, mahkamah kata the fact that A tadi lantik dia sebagai executor in itself makes the trust completely constituted. Therefore, waris-waris beneficiary of the will, not beneficiary of trust, yang saya cakap beneficiary of the will tu tak sama dengan beneficiary of the trust. So beneficiary of the will cannot claim that 900 remaining itu. Right? Kat sini anak-anak dia tu ialah waris lah yang nak minta balik duit tu. Okay, so apakah syarat-syarat dia? Syarat dia, there must be a present intention of forgiving a debt and making a gift of property. Intention must continue sampai dia mati. Donor's death, macam dalam kes ni, dia ada niat untuk lepaskan hutang tersebut. Lepas tu niat tersebut must continue sampai dia mati, and property must vest in the donee. And vesting of property kat sini dalam strong and bird ni kita lihat from the fact that he was appointed as dia punya administrator tu. Okay, Section 64 Contracts Act Malaysia. Promisee may dispense with or remit performance of promise. Every promise may dispense with or remit wholly or in part the performance of the promise made to him, or may extend the time for such performance, or may accept instead of any satisfaction which he thinks fit. So kenapa saya sebut section ni? Section ini adalah similar dengan the whole construction of rule against strong and bird. Okay, so it's similarity of the concept is in section 64B. Tapi 64B of course it is actually referring to a contract. Cuma saya highlight kat sini we have a similar provision but in Contracts Act which is applicable to contract lah. Tapi of course rule and bird ni is actually for trust, for to prove that is an exception to the maxim equity will not assist or volunteer. Okay, this is illustration of Contracts Act. I will not read it. Boleh baca nanti sendiri. So these are cases, you all boleh baca, rujuk, cases yang refer to rule in strong and bird ataupun apply the rule in strong and bird. Okay, the second exception is donatio mortis causa. Okay, what is DMC? DMC is a gift which is made in contemplation of death of the donor, and the volunteer is assisted by equity to perfect the gift at the donor's death in cases where it is imperfect. Okay, so donatio mortis causa ni adalah apabila seseorang tu dia dah nak mati, lepas tu dia buat satu gift, hadiah. So sebab tu dia sebut sebagai a gift which is made in contemplation of death. Okay, so of course bila gift tu is made in contemplation of death, it might not be completely constituted. Okay, so then the issue of volunteer semua will arise. So therefore, DMC is an exception to the maxim. Okay. So the DMC punya requirement is stated in the case of Cain and Moon. So the gift is in contemplation of death. Maknanya kalau you nak guna this exception, first requirement itu, gift itu must be made in contemplation of death. Apa maksud in contemplation of death? Maknanya let's say usually it refers to somebody who is dying lah. Okay. So apa maksud who is dying? Kita kena bezakan. Contohnya seorang yang nak bunuh diri. Dia tahu dia akan mati. Is that a gift in contemplation of death? Memang dia akan, okay lah, dia beranggapan dia akan mati because he wants to commit suicide. So dia buat gift. So, but that kind of gift is cannot fall under DMC kerana it is against public policy. Okay. So gift in contemplation of death usually macam contohnya kalau dia sakit terminal illness. Okay. Dia buat gift tersebut. So in contemplation of death tu dia kena masa dia dah nak mati sangat lah. Macam dia kata macam nazak lah. Tapi dia masih boleh say something. Okay, so that is gift in contemplation of death. Let's say seorang itu diagnosed of a terminal illness and doktor kata you have 1 month to live. So question is that a gift? Kalau dia buat pemberian, is it a gift in contemplation of death? That one, no. Sebab dia ada that period of 1 month. So it is not a gift in contemplation of death. Gift in contemplation of death is the time, of course kita tak tahu bila kita mati kan, tapi like the time of death tu, it's very, very near. Okay, so, and there's nothing you can do. You cannot execute transfer, you cannot buat will, you cannot do anything. So that gift is a gift in contemplation of death. Okay, subject of the gift must, subject matter of the gift, that means the property must have been delivered to the donee. That means kena bagi to the donee. The gift is made in circumstances which show that the property is to revert back to the donor should he recover. So these are the 3 requirements. So in contemplation of death, subject matter tu kita bagi kepada donee, kepada orang tu, dan orang tu tahu yang kalau dia tak mati, harta tersebut akan kembali kepada donor. Okay, so that is requirement in Keynes and Moon for DMC. Okay, the last one is proprietary estoppel. Okay, saya tak nak go into proprietary estoppel sebab ini adalah topik yang you all dah belajar last semester. So, but basically just to refresh your memory, proprietary estoppel kalau kita rujuk Lord Denning in Inwards and Baker, it is quite plain from those authorities that if the owner of the land requests another or indeed allows another to expend money on the land under an expectation created or encouraged by the landlord that he will be able to remain there, that raises an equity in the licensee such as to entitle him to stay. He has a license coupled with an equity. So kalau estoppel tu, kalau you all boleh ingat, dia ada requirement kan, buat representation, and then based on representation you change your position, and then the person who made representation cannot go back on your word. So those are the general requirements of estoppel. So kalau you all tak ingat, you all go back to your notes last semester to see what is estoppel. Okay, so tapi untuk exception ni adalah proprietary estoppel, not promissory estoppel. Okay, so these are the cases. And that is all for today. Okay, okay, itu saja untuk hari ini. Saya ada beberapa perkara nak cakap dan saya nak decision from you all sebelum kita stop. Number 1, sekejap lagi pukul 10, saya dah buat announcement dalam UKM Folio, kita akan start tutorial dan saya ada suruh you all baca case kan. So we will discuss the case. Saya nak you all punya active participation in the tutorial. So I want you to explain to me the case. Itu number 1. So we will start tutorial today and tomorrow. We have 2 classes today. you all pergi dekat, sebab bila you all teams, you all boleh automatically masuk into the groups, right? Boleh kan? Hello? You there?
Boleh Doktor.
Okay, so you go into your own groups for today and tomorrow. Secondly, saya kena buat kelas ganti sebab last week tak ada last week cuti, so saya nak buat kelas ganti untuk actually one class saja untuk 2 topik, secret trust dan resulting trust, sebab secret trust tu pendek je. Jadi saya nak tanya whether you all nak buat bila? You want to do, my suggestion is tomorrow petang. Maybe dalam 3 o'clock or 2:30 ataupun 3 lah. Okay. Ataupun alternatively, if you don't want to do it tomorrow afternoon, sebab lepas tu next week dah hari raya, kan? So, my suggestion is the week after that, which is your mid-semester break. Tapi only if you all don't mind. Kalau you rasa, oh, that is your mid-semester break and you don't want to have the replacement class, then we have to do it sebab lepas you all balik daripada mid-semester break tu, kalau kita lihat balik, sekejap kalau kita lihat balik performa tu, let me buka balik. Kalau you all lihat balik performa tu, performa dan plan pengajaran. Okay. Let me just. Okay, sekejap. Okay, kalau you all lihat balik, okay, you all nampak kan plan pengajaran ni. So, kita ada minggu 1, 2 cuti, sebenarnya bukan Wesak ni, sorry cuti Nuzul Quran, silap. So, ni hari ni 4 hari bulan. Okay, 4 hari bulan. Lepas tu minggu ke-5 hari raya. Lepas tu mid semester break. Sepatutnya kelas tu kita buat 25 hari bulan April, tetapi saya tak ada sini 25 April dan juga 2 Mei. Okay, 2 Mei quiz will still go on, tetapi 25 April tu saya tak ada. So saya nak tanya you all nak macam mana? Nak buat kelas ganti itu bila? Sebab saya akan buat quiz only topik hari ni dan juga topik 3 certainties. Dia tak masuk amanah rahsia. So, it depends on you all lah bila you all nak buat kelas. You all nak kelas physical when you come back, or you want to do it tomorrow, or you want to do it masa your mid-semester break. I need to know now, if possible. Sebab kalau you all nak buat esok, I need to know now lah. Kalau you tak nak buat esok, you let me know. Then it has to be either, but kalau you nak buat masa mid semester break, you kena bagi tahu saya cepat lah. Yeah. Kalau you nak buat bila you all datang balik, bila you datang balik means either you want to do it physical or you want to do it online, is up to you. So you let me know. Tapi kalau you nak buat masa you datang balik, it has to be after, maknanya after berapa bulan? After, sebab saya tak akan ada di sini daripada 24 sampai 5 Mei. Jadi saya only will be back minggu yang ke-8 tu, yang Dr. Khalidah dah start. You all nak bila you rasa? I need to know First, do you want to do it tomorrow or not?
Doktor,
Uh-uh.
tomorrow at 3 some of us ada lecture dengan international trade law.
Oh, okay. So you
Ah.
cannot do it tomorrow.
Yep.
Okay. So macam ni, boleh tak? Sebab saya rasa you punya ketua kelas tak ada hari ni. Dia bagi tahu saya dia tak sihat. So, can you let me know before Hari Raya when you want to do it? Okay? Boleh tak macam tu?
Okay, sure doktor.
Sophia, you bagi tahu kat you all yang ada kat sini, you all kena decide lah bila you all nak buat. Maybe you all ada group ke apa, you let me know you all nak buat bila, dan satu number one, since we are not going to do it tomorrow, so number one is either you nak buat masa mid break. That one is up to you lah, because kalau you tak nak, tak apa. Sebab that one your mid semester break, so I cannot ask you to do class during your mid semester break. So tapi if you want to do it after that, that means we have to do it masa minggu ke berapa tadi yang Dr. Khalida dah start tu, minggu after that is either online or physical. We can cari time yang sesuai lah. Then you let me know. Okay?
Boleh Prof.
Alright. So
nanti saya akan refer balik dengan Sufi.
Nanti bagi tahu dia, suruh dia bagi tahu saya Kalau boleh bagi tahu saya sebelum hari raya lah. Bagi tahu saya sebelum hari raya sebab I need to do the planning. Okay. So terima kasih. I will upload the slide and then untuk yang tutorial I'll see you at 10. Okay, dekat saya ada buat different channels for different tutorial group. So you enter at your own group lah. Okay, terima kasih. See you later. Terima kasih Assalamualaikum.
Terima kasih doktor.
Terima kasih doktor.
Terima kasih doktor.
Terima kasih doktor.
Terima kasih.